Welcome back, y'all, and happy Monday. This is the Bluechip Breakdown. I'm your host, Bull. It's officially game week, so it's time for us to scout Ohio State's offense versus Tennessee's defense. We'll be taking a look at the stats side by side. We'll also be talking about their offensive line. We'll talk about their running game, their passing game, their RPO game, and then I will be giving you my final thoughts at the end. Please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, y'all, let's start off with the stats. And what we're looking at right here is Ohio State's offense versus Tennessee's defense. Anything that you see in green means that that team is winning in that category. I'll tell you right now that Ohio State is about 52% pass to about 48% run. So they are a pass-first team. We told y'all before last week that this is more of a finesse team, and the passing game probably suits them a lot better. We'll see how that works out. With this very cold weather, it might be snowing, all different types of things. The elements definitely favor Tennessee, but let's start off at the top. Total offense for Ohio State, they're ranked number 38. Tennessee's total defense is ranked number 5. Ohio State's scoring offense is ranked number 10. Tennessee's scoring defense is ranked number 4. As far as the sacks, Ohio State is giving up about 1 sack per game. That's good for number 17 in the country. Tennessee is getting about 2.4 sacks per game. That's good for about 44 in the country. On down to the passing numbers, they're ranked number 38, with their passing offense, and Tennessee is ranked number 16 with our passing defense. Their rushing offense is ranked number 60. Tennessee's rush defense is ranked number 9. They are number 47 in third down conversions. Tennessee is number 5 in that category. Red zone, they're ranked number 40. Tennessee's ranked number 11. Turnovers, they're ranked number 37. Tennessee is ranked number 34. So that one's pretty close. And I also want to say this real quick because we talked about this on Saturday. P and I did about how, we've been watching all these Buckeye podcasts. I'm sure that y'all have been doing the exact same thing. But something that's been so funny to me is the way that they try to say, oh, well, Tennessee's got, really good stats on defense. They've got some good ones on offense too, but they haven't really played anybody. They haven't played up against good offenses and things like that. But let me try to explain something to y'all, okay, for the final time. If you know ball, and I mean, you could go to guys like Coach Saban, who's coached in the SEC and the Big Ten, Urban Meyer, who's coached in the SEC and the Big Ten. You could even go to guys like Josh Pate. Anybody who understands ball knows that the SEC is a better conference. It's a deeper conference from top to bottom. We had like 7 or 8 teams that could have made the college football playoffs. And just as like a point of reference, I would say that Penn State would be close to like LSU if they played in the SEC. But we know that LSU at this point is not a playoff team, but Penn State is. In Indiana, I would say they're probably like a step below Vanderbilt, who actually went toe-to-toe with LSU in Baton Rouge at night. That's the same team that Tennessee blew out. Some of these Buckeye fans are like, oh, that doesn't really mean anything. It's just different inside of this league, man. I think that Indiana would probably be somewhere around Oklahoma to like Auburn, maybe even Mississippi State if they played inside of this league. But of course, in the Big Ten, they are a playoff team. So the whole point right there is just to say that, yeah, their stats might look pretty good, but you got to keep in mind that there's only like 3.5 teams in the Big Ten that really have a pulse. Everybody else is absolutely horrible. So, if it's bad on bad, if there's no real resistance, of course your stats are going to look good. That does not mean that the offenses in the Big Ten are better than the ones in the SEC. I mean, I think that that's just common sense. You can watch the games and see that for yourself. So all these things, to me, look really good on paper for Tennessee, but let's dive a little bit deeper. And now we're going to take a look at their key players on offense, starting off with their quarterback, Will Howard, listed at 6'4", 235 pounds. He is a graduate. He's going to be number 18. Passing this season, he's averaging 238 yards per game through the air, 9.1 yards per attempt, which is really good. Also, completing passes at 72.3%. That's also excellent. And he's averaging about 2 touchdowns per game. Now, on down to his rushing numbers, he's getting about 6 carries per game for 10 yards. So he's a guy that they will have some design quarterback runs for, especially in some shorter situations, down the distances, things like that inside of the red zone. But he's a guy that I'm higher on him than I feel like most people are. He can make all the throws. I think that he's a very talented player. We talked about it before that he runs about 19 miles per hour, which is really good speed, especially for his size. They'll use him just like on some quarterback powers, on some quarterback draws in the read option game and things like that. So he's not a big scrambler, though. So just like within the actual passing game, he's not a guy that you're expecting to, scramble and break loose, but he does a pretty good job within that pocket. I think that he's pretty accurate, but he does have a tendency to force the football into some coverage because he trusts a very talented wide receiver core. Next player is going to be running back Quinshon Judkins, listed at 6 feet tall, 219 pounds. He is a junior. He's number 1 on their roster. He's averaging 12 carries a game for 67 yards, and he's averaging 5.5 yards per carry, and he has 8 touchdowns on the season. He is a very good running back, and we knew that from his time last season at Ole Miss. I mean, he gets downhill, and they like to put him out in space. They like to try to hit those edges with him, but he does run hard. You know, he's going to run through contact. He's going to fight for those extra yards. He also looks good catching the football out of the backfield. That's something that I would not be surprised to see Ohio State do in this game with some running back screens and things like that. But he is a player that Tennessee is going to have very good fundamentals with, come up, you know, gang tackle and all of that type of stuff. If we do that, then I feel like we can limit him, you know, just as far as how productive he will be in this game. Next player is another running back, Travion Henderson, listed at 5'10", 208 pounds. He's a senior. He's number 32 on their roster. He's averaging 9 carries a game for 62 yards, 7 yards per carry, and he has 8 touchdowns on this season as well. Now, he's a really powerful back. They use him more in between those tackles, and he actually has a really good, you know, obviously, yards per carry average at 7. That is absolutely outstanding. I think that Ohio State has 2 very good running backs, very similar with what they like to do, or just very similar with their style. He's a one-cut and get vertical sort of a player. I'm not going to say that he's the shiftiest. Neither one of these guys are overly shifty, but they can make you miss, you know, if you take bad angles and things like that. He's going to run through the contact, and he looks really good catching the football out of the backfield. Next, we have wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, listed at 6'3", 215 pounds. He is a freshman. He's number 4. He's averaging 4 catches for 77.8 yards per game, 16.4 yards per catch, and he has 10 touchdowns on the season, which is absolutely outstanding for a true freshman. But he's a just incredible athlete. You know, I've told y'all before a long time ago that to me, he looks like Julio Jones when Julio Jones was in the NFL. Like, he's almost at that level. He's made a lot of really nice catches. A lot of times they like to send him vertical, and because they know he's such a vertical threat and teams like to play off coverage with him, they will run a ton of hitches with him as well. But we'll also see some slants, maybe some quick screens and things like that, just to get the football in his hands. He's a guy that I think that Tennessee's cornerbacks can, you know, I would say slow down. I don't know if we're going to shut him down, but I feel very confident with how we're going to play versus a player like Jeremiah Smith. Last player that we'll be talking about today is going to be Emeka Egbuka, listed at 6'1", 205 pounds. He is a graduate. He's number 2 on their roster. He's averaging 5 catches for about 62 yards per game, and he's averaging about 12.4 yards per catch. He has 9 touchdowns on the season. Now, he's going to be more of the, you know, intermediate sort of a, you know, route runner. We're going to see a whole lot of outs. We'll see some digs. We'll see some slants. We'll see a ton of hitches from all these guys. And they do a really good job of just kind of scheming him up within their personnel groupings and within their formations to kind of get him lined up versus some, you know, mismatches, I would say, like linebackers, maybe some safeties, things like that. So that is something that I think Tennessee is going to have a really good game plan for, because he is a very good wide receiver. He's going pro next season. I would say top 2 rounds. He has really good speed. You know, he has good hands. He runs really nice routes, and he can do some things after the catch as well. So these are the 5 players that we put up today. Obviously, there are more for Ohio State. Very talented roster, but we only do 5 every week. So I think that these would be the 5 that Tennessee really needs to be keen on to have success on defense. All right, y'all, now let's take a look at this offensive line. There has been some talk about potentially switching some things up, but I don't know that they're going to switch up that much, just because it wouldn't make that much sense to me. But we'll just kind of go through who their starters are first and foremost. We've got Josh Fryer, who would be their right tackle. He is number 70. I think that he's pretty solid. He's not the most fleet of foot, and we talked about it before, that this offensive line is a lot more about pass blocking. None of these guys are really body movers. Outside of the next player right here, Tegra, number 77, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, but he's their right guard. They're talking about him potentially not playing in this game. And I just can't figure it out on film why they would say that, because if you look at whenever he's actually, you know, executing on the people that he's supposed to be blocking, he does maybe the best job out of anybody, especially with moving bodies. But it does sound like he's missed too many assignments for the Buckeye faithful, and he might not be starting in this game. I would be very happy to see that. But let's come on down to Donovan Jackson, who was a guard before, but he's now playing at left tackle. I don't see them moving him around. That just wouldn't make any sense, because I also think that he's one of their more consistent players up front. Now let's come on down to Austin Searfield, who was their starting left guard. I think that he might still play there, but there has been some smoke about, you know, maybe mixing and matching and putting in some other bodies as well. I don't know if they're going to be splitting time, but Ryan Day is supposed to be talking at some point today. So maybe we'll get a little bit more feedback off of who they're planning on playing. I doubt that they would do that. That would just be a dumb move by them to let Tennessee know who they need to be getting ready for in this game. But I think that he's pretty solid. You know, again, he's more of a pass blocker. He's not going to move a whole bunch of bodies. Carson Hinsman, who's been starting at center for them over these past few games, they're talking about him potentially moving away from center and playing at one of the guards, because it sounds like they feel like he's a better guard. And then they're talking about replacing him with Joshua Padilla at center, who is an underclassman. Now, like we just touched on, I've watched all these guys play individually, and I don't see a whole lot more coming from Joshua Padilla than I've seen with Carson Hinsman. So if they do that, to me, that just plays into Tennessee's hand. And I'm hoping that this is what they try to do, y'all. I'm hoping that they don't stick with the offensive line that's played together so that they can't gel, because we all know that that is a major part of having a good offensive line. And, again, we're talking about underclassmen coming in. Josh Simmons, he is out. And then also I will talk about Seth McLaughlin, who was their center. He's also out. I think we all know that at this point. But a couple of other players right here, Luke Montgomery, he could be getting some playing time at one of the guard spots as well. He might plug in for Tegra, or it could be Carson Hinsman plugging in for Tegra if they move Hinsman away from center. So let's scroll this thing over and let's just take a look right here. Y'all can see their run blocking, just to let you know that this column right here with the impact block percentage as far as run blocking goes, that's just the percentage of plays that they were winning in with run blocking. So it looks pretty solid here. I mean, obviously it's not overwhelming. Like we said, they're not a great run blocking football team. But what I really like to focus on, y'all, is right here with the pass blocking numbers. I like to look at the sacks and all that type of stuff given up, and especially that pressure rate. So what we're seeing is Josh Fryer, he looks very solid. Pro Football Focus is saying he's only given up 1 sack this season. That could be a little bit off. But, he's only giving up pressure at about 3.3%. I think that's pretty good for a tackle, but he ain't seen ends like he's about to see coming at him in waves this weekend. Tegra has actually given up 0 sacks, and his pressure rate is lower at 2.2%. So that actually backs up what I saw on film. He is not a bad player, so I don't know where all that stuff's coming from. I think it's a bunch of people who just don't really understand football. Next, we have Donovan Jackson, who's given up 2 sacks. Now, those sacks could have been with him playing at tackle, or it could have been with him playing at guard, which is where he started the season off at, and he's giving up pressure at 5.7%. I think that he is a guy that Tennessee can find success with on the edge. And then we'll come on down to Austin Searfield, giving up 3 sacks this season, but his pressure rate is only at 2.5%. I find that pretty interesting. Carson Hinsman, he's also given up 1 sack. Pressure rate is at 4.5%. And if we come down to Luke Montgomery, he's given up 0 sacks with 0 pressures. But you can also see that he has not played that much. And, whenever he has played, it was in some mop-up duty. And then we have Josh Padilla, who is at the exact same spot, right? Playing in some mop-up duty, not playing a whole bunch. So I think that those numbers could be a little bit misleading. Now let's take a look at their run concepts. What you're going to see over here is that they run the outside zone about 15% of the time. They run the inside zone the most at 33% of the time. And they run the man concept more than we have seen throughout this entire season. So this would probably be a difference with Big Ten teams versus SEC teams. In the SEC, it's mostly going to be some sort of a zone scheme or gap scheme. We have not seen teams that run more man. And just the only difference there is that in zone blocking, you're going to be blocking more of an area. And in man blocking, there is a specific person that you are assigned to block. I think that that could play in Tennessee's hands, because if you're talking about trying to run the football with one-on-one blocking versus any of our guys up front or our linebackers, absolutely love that matchup. So that is pretty interesting, and it will be a change of pace in this game. They run the power 3% of the time. They run counter 10% of the time. Draws at 1%. Pull lead is at 10%. So the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this is that they really do a lot of different things within their running schemes, right? Like they really do mix things up. And that is interesting. I don't think that it's going to make that much of a difference in this game. Like I said, the one thing that really stood out to me was how often Ohio State likes to run man concepts within their running game. I think that that's a place that Tennessee will be able to win at for sure. Now let's talk about their RPO game. And RPO is a run pass option. It's exactly what it sounds like. The quarterback has certain reads and he can hand the football off for a run, or he can keep it himself. Or if things look better for them to pass it, then they will pass it. So this is something that Ohio State does a pretty good amount of. We see that it's at about 16.7%, and 64% of the time they're going to be running the football. And that is, again, going to be dictated based off of what the defense does. So I think a lot of times defenses would much rather you run the football, especially with Ohio State probably not being the best run team. They're not the most powerful at the point of contact. You probably want to see them run the football more than passing it. It could kind of change in this game. They're passing the football at about 36%. So that's about how that looks. Now we're looking at the passes that they throw to the most. And up at the top, we do have the hitch route. They throw that pass about 15.4% of the time. It is the most out of all the passes that they throw, and they're completing those passes at 80%. Next is an out route. They're throwing to that about 12% of the time, and they're completing 69% of those passes. At number 3, we have the backfield flare, which is simply just either a running back, wide receiver, or a tight end coming out of the backfield and just basically running out to the flats. They like to throw this a lot within their deeper passing game. If everything's covered up deep, then they will dump it off to a running back, wide receiver, tight end, whoever coming out of the backfield. And I think that that is a good way just to keep your offense kind of moving, not have to hold on to the football for too long. Next, we have crossing routes, and they run that about 8.4% of the time. They're completing those passes at 76.7%. Then we have slants. Then we have the widescreen, and then we finally get to a vertical route, the corner route. That is an outside breaking route. They throw that about 5.6% of the time, only completing those passes at 45%. So just looking at the routes, right, like we could come back down, okay, speed out is at number 8. In route is going to be at number 8 as well. So it's tied at number 8. And then we have the go route, which is just a vertical pass. But most of the passes that they like to throw are outside of the numbers. That means that our cornerbacks and our star players will get targeted a lot. As a Tennessee Vol fan, you got to feel very confident about that just because we have very, very good corners. I love to see this because what that pretty much tells me is our safeties and linebackers might not get targeted as much in this game. Now, the game plan could totally change for Ohio State in this one, where they try to target our linebackers a little bit more. And they will have some things kind of drawn up to get them isolated or to try to get them isolated versus some of their speedier wide receivers or just wide receiver threats, period. But just in looking at this, I don't see anything that Tennessee cannot handle. Next, we're going to look at their team passing versus the number of rushers. And up at the top, 4 rushers, which is typical, right? Like teams typically only are going to be bringing 4. That is very, very normal. But they are completing those passes at 68%. They have 13 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. On down at number 2, 5 rushers. They are completing those passes at 72%. They have 10 touchdowns to no interceptions. So what that tells me is you probably don't want to only bring 5. But now let's come on down to the next one at number 3. Only 3 rushers. They're only completing those passes at 63.3%. That is the lowest out of all these categories. So dropping 8 might be the way to go some in this game. They have 2 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. And then at number 4, 6 rushers. They're doing a really good job right there, completing those passes at 78%, 3 touchdowns to no interceptions. Now, let's come on down here to the passing by pressure. And this is something that we've talked about before with Will Howard. What's interesting is with no pressure, he's completing his passes at 77%. He has 22 passing touchdowns and 5 interceptions. But then if you come on down to him versus pressure, he's only completing those passes at 50%, which is very typical. And he has 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. But the interesting part is it's more about the pressure that you don't blitz with, because versus the blitz, he's completing passes at almost 73%. He has 14 touchdowns to 1 interception. So it'll be interesting to see what Coach Tim Banks wants to do to get pressure on Will Howard without having to commit too many bodies as blitzers. And last thing that we will be looking at today is their passing versus the different coverages and where they're having the most success at and where they're kind of struggling more at. So we can see up at the top that cover 3 is what they're seeing the most, and they are completing those passes at almost 79%. They have 5 touchdowns to 1 interception, and that makes sense because we talked about all the shorter routes that they run. Cover 3 is a deeper coverage. The underneath stuff, especially to the outside, is there. So that would explain why they have so much success versus that coverage, and that's actually the coverage that Tennessee runs the most. Next, we have quarters coverage. They've seen that the second most this season, and they're completing those passes at about 67%. They have 4 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Now, this is what I think Tennessee might play the most of in this game because it's a deeper coverage that can turn to man in certain situations. I think that's exactly what we want to do, versus this Ohio State offense, is try to limit the deep shots that they can take down the field and come up and make tackles. So next, we have cover 1, and they are at about 67% right there, 5 touchdowns to no interceptions. But this one right here, cover 2, they're completing their passes at about 64%, but they only have 3 touchdowns to 2 picks. I think that this one might be one that Tennessee tries to run a little bit more in this game. This is what Michigan ran the most of in their game, and they did get some critical interceptions. Actually, those 2 picks both came from Michigan. So I think that Tennessee is going to try to replicate that. We know that we have coaches on their staff at Michigan that used to coach with Tennessee that I'm sure that we've been talking to. I have no questions about that. So we'll see if Ohio State can come out with a different game plan. But also cover 6, which is just a mix of cover 4 and cover 2. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because you look at the most productive coverages outside of cover 6, it has been quarters coverage, which is cover 4 and cover 2. So why not mix that up, right? I think that is a perfect coverage. Tennessee does not run a whole lot of this, but we can definitely do it. It's not a hard or difficult coverage to run. And you'll see right and left Again, this is a mix of cover 4 on one side and cover 2 on the other. I don't know which side would be the cover 2 side if you're talking about right to left. So they're in the 50s with either one of those, whether it's right or left in cover 6 as far as their passing completion percentage. And then, if you look at the passing touchdowns, we're talking about a total of 2 to 2 interceptions. So I think that the blueprint is kind of out there on how to have success versus this Chip Kelly offense. So with all that being said, let me tell you what I've seen from Ohio State's offense on film. They are more of a finesse team, right? And a lot of people have been talking about Ohio State versus Georgia back in 2022 after they lost to Michigan, the way that Ohio State played in that game. But keep in mind, that game was indoors. This game's going to be outside, where it's going to be more difficult for you to throw the football down the field on a consistent basis. That would definitely, I think, play more into Tennessee's hands if they try to do that. But it also plays more into Tennessee's hands if they have to run the football more, because we have a very stout run defense. Our guys up front are not just about speed and getting after the quarterback. They're about stopping the run first, from in to, both defensive tackles to the other end. And we've got plenty of guys, okay? It's not just about our edge players, but our defensive tackles, we're 4 to 5, 6 deep right there too. The rotation will keep on coming, and it won't be much of a drop-off. So I would expect that Ohio State, whenever they do have to run the football, will try to double team all our guys up front, and maybe like let our linebackers roam free for the most part. Now, obviously, they do a lot of different things within their running game. They can hit the outside, they can hit the inside, and things like that. So they can find ways to get up to the second level. But if they don't get up to the second level, that actually plays into Tennessee's hands, because our linebackers do a very good job if no one comes up to block them, right? Like they are going to know what the play is that's coming based off of the different formations and down the distance and all that type of stuff. We always do a very good job with that with our players on defense. They're going to know where to go, where to be. And if you don't come up and get a body on them, they will absolutely wreak shop. So I am very much looking forward to seeing what is Ohio State going to do on offense. We also know that, I'm not trying to pick on these guys, but let's just keep it real. Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, they're not the toughest dudes, man. Like, if you're doing a bunch of talking behind the scenes, they tend to kind of like fall into the hand and try to prove you're wrong. We saw that get them beat versus Michigan. And this whole week, okay, over these past couple of weeks, everyone's been talking about, man, Tennessee is the more physical team. Ohio State needs to get away from trying to run the ball. They need to pass the football more. Now, will Ryan Day and Chip Kelly come out to try to prove a point and say, look, we are the more physical team. We're going to run it right smack dab at them? I think that they're probably going to have to do a little bit more of that in this game. But again, that plays into Tennessee's hands. I also think that they'll run more tempo. I've heard a lot of folks talking about that, and it does kind of feel like their offense works better with tempo, and Tennessee's defense hasn't looked the best versus tempo. So we have to be ready for that. We have to be ready to get the calls in quickly. We have to have some automatics just to get people lined up and ready for the snap and not get caught off guard. But I think that if we can slow down their tempo some, if we can make them have to try to methodically drive down the field, sustain those drives, because we talked about it. I think that the coverages will mostly be cover 4, deeper coverages. Just don't get beat deep, come up and make tackles, make them have to sustain drives. Try to get pressure with your front 4. I would love to see us drop 8 and only bring 3 sometimes, because as we saw, that is something that Ohio State has struggled with. But I just think that if we make them have to sustain those drives, if we could get them, maybe not running as much tempo, it definitely plays into Tennessee's hands. If we just line up, okay, if everything's even, if we line up and play, I love this matchup. Yes, they've got a very good offense. They've got a very good team. But I think that just because of the way that this game has to be played, it favors Tennessee a little bit more. And I definitely trust our cornerbacks. We have 2 really good ones. Actually, we have 3 very good ones. 6, whenever he comes in, he's going to be playing more off coverage. But the other 2 cornerbacks, 3 and 1, they're going to come up to the line of scrimmage every now and then and play some bump and run coverage. So I would not be surprised to see Tennessee run more man in certain down and distances and situations and things like that. And of course, we have coaches on the Michigan staff that used to coach at Tennessee that I know that we've been talking to. And Michigan is going to be very forthcoming with all the information that they can give to us to help us beat Ohio State. And I would say that on the opposite side, Georgia might be trying to help Ohio State with some of the things that they saw with some of our tendencies, because we heard their offensive linemen kind of coming out and saying, hey, we knew that the stunts were coming based off of this, that, and the third. So we've got to do a much better job, I think, of self-scouting before this game and be prepared to perform better versus the types of looks that Georgia gave us. And what Georgia did was a whole lot of quick game stuff. It was a whole lot of, snap the ball. We're trying to throw it right here, right now. I would definitely expect that that's what Ohio State will do in this game within their passing game. So they're already worried about our front 4. They're already, worried about our pass rush. Tim Banks needs to give them a reason to continue to worry about it early on. I want to see us blitzing, all that type of stuff. We'll probably see some screens and all that, but we'll be sitting on that. But we need to make them really, really furious. We need for Will Howard to get those happy feet. We need for the staff to say, hey, look, we can't force the football down the field, without max protection and all that type of stuff, because they're coming and they're getting home. And we want them mixing up their offensive line and stuff. We want for their crowd, for their fans to see it early on, like, oh my gosh, we can't block these guys and go ahead and start turn on their players. If we get up early, a lot of those guys, people are Buckeye fans, I think that they'll be leaving, and that just plays into Tennessee's hands. We saw that versus LSU back in 2022 when we took over Death Valley. I think that we could do the same thing here, but we can get off to a good start. And for me, that really starts off with our defense setting the tone, okay? And of course, it always starts up front, where I think Tennessee has a very good advantage in pretty much all phases of this game. But those are my thoughts. Please leave yours with me down in the comment section. And as always, please do make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. We'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.